We're a family that loves practicing Taekwondo, so we've embarked on a new challenge.
사실 저희 가족들이 아픔이 정말 많습니다. 제가 아침에 일어났는데 반신이 마비가 왔었고 저희 아이는 태어나자마자 인공 심박기를 달았었고 정상으로도 살기 힘들다는 진단을 받았었지만 이 아이를 보면서 기적이라는 것을 알게 됐거든요. 그래서 태권도는 행복 그 자체입니다.
태권도를 해서 강해지니까 더 자신감이 올라가고 행복해요.
I believe Taekwondo is a blessing from heaven. It has made us hopeful for the future. Every day, we're excited to see what's in store for us tomorrow. Practice it with your family. Taekwondo brings happiness.
Authorities have opened a joint investigation into the area in Gyeongsangbuk-do province, where the fire first started, that ultimately led to the worst wildfire damage in the country. On the first day of the resumption of short selling in Korea, local stocks fell 3%, while the Korean currency weakened against the greenback to a level unseen since March 2009. Myanmar is reeling from last week's devastating earthquake that killed over 1,700 people and destroyed the homes of many others. It's March 31st, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. With the main fires in the country contained after a long uphill battle, authorities now turn their eyes to figure out what caused the disaster. Lee Soo-jin has more.
South Korean police, along with the National Forensic Service and firefighting authorities, have launched their first joint investigation into the country's worst ever wildfire. Police in Gyeongsangbuk-do province on Monday morning using drones began conducting on-site inspections in Useong-gun County, the ignition site of the wildfire in the province, to determine what caused it and the direction in which the fire spread. The fires in Gyeongsangbuk-do province saw about 480 square kilometers of woodland affected, equivalent to 80% of the size of Seoul, and left 26 people dead. The police plan to examine traces of flames left on the trees around the tomb and the surrounding areas to determine the direction that the fire spread, and search the area around the site of the ignition to find any evidence of materials that may have caused the fire. Analysis of the evidence found from the on-site inspections is expected to take at least 3 weeks. The police revealed on Sunday that they booked a 56-year-old man on Friday without detention on charges of starting the fire on March 22nd while tending to the grave of his grandparents. The man denies the charges. On Saturday, the police found a lighter that was found at the scene and has requested analysis from the National Forensic Service for fingerprints or DNA evidence. With the main fires in both Gyeongsangbuk-do and Gyeongsangnam-do provinces now contained, the government is also focusing on helping those affected. This includes providing temporary housing and livelihood support for those who have been displaced. More than 3,000 houses were completely burned down, and significant damage was also inflicted on 30 national heritage sites and 2,000 agricultural facilities. 이수진, Arirang News.
Amid unstable global stock markets, as well as the resumption of short selling at home, local stocks were sharply down today. Park Jun-han has the details.
Starting Monday, South Korea resumed short selling on its stock market after a 17-month suspension. And for the first time in 5 years, the country is allowing short selling for all listed stocks. With investors now able to borrow and sell stocks before buying them back later, the market is seeing increased volatility, which has intensified amid falling global stock prices. The benchmark Kospi at around 1:30 p.m. briefly dropped below 2,480 points. At the market's close on Monday, 3:30 p.m. local time, the Kospi closed at around 2,481, down 3% from last Friday's market close. On the same day, the value of the US dollar against the Korean won climbed to 1,472.91 per dollar, up 6.41 from last Friday's close. This is the highest since March 2009. Short selling involves investors borrowing stocks, selling them at the market price, and later repurchasing them, ideally at a lower price, to return to the lender.
That's what you have in a normal market, in any international market. If it goes too high, you have short sellers to stop it from going too high.
To create a safer and fairer stock trading environment and to facilitate the return of short selling, the Korea Exchange is implementing measures such as strengthened penalties for illegal short selling and increased monitoring of transaction activities. Additionally, those who borrow stocks must repay them within 90 days, with an extension of up to a year.
Well, the large complaint that the individual investors had was that larger companies were engaged in naked short selling. That means short selling without borrowed stocks on hand. And then I believe they have now databases for short selling transactions so that anybody can see that the transactions are done fairly rather than below the table. So sometimes.
Amid short-term market volatility, industry experts emphasize the long-term necessity of short selling in Korea, as it is expected to attract more foreign capital inflow, enhance liquidity, and help investors manage risks. Park Jun-han, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment case has lasted for more than 3 months, as the Constitutional Court justices take a record amount of time to deliberate on his political fate. This is leading to various speculations. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young explains.
The Constitutional Court is working cautiously and thoroughly on President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment case, as speculation continues over when the justices will deliver their ruling. Appearing before the National Assembly on Monday, the Constitutional Court Secretary-General Kim Jong-un said the 8-member bench is deliberating with caution in their frequent in-depth reviews and discussions. Kim added even he wasn't informed of how many times the justices convened or what stage they were in their deliberations due to the high level of confidentiality. The justices have been deliberating for more than a month after Yoon's final trial hearing in February, the longest period yet for a presidential case. Once each justice concludes their review and expresses their opinion, the bench is expected to draw up their collective decision before announcing the ruling date 2 to 3 days in advance. While some believe the ruling could be as early as this Thursday, if the bench schedules a Friday ruling in line with past presidential impeachments, April 4th and 11th are key dates to watch. But given the record deliberation period, other observers say the verdict could take longer to be issued, as the justices may be sharply split in their opinions on whether or not President Yoon's martial law declaration warrants an impeachment. The court needs at least 6 votes to remove a president. If 3 or more justices are against impeachment, Yoon will be restored to office. At this point, April 18th is broadly considered the deadline for the bench, the date Justices Moon Young-bae and Lee Mi-sun retire. In 2017, the court dismissed President Park Geun-hye on a Friday before Acting Chief Justice Lee Jung-mi stepped down the next Monday. But this time around, the 2 vacancies would leave only 6 justices on the bench, below the 7-member threshold required to deliver a ruling. The opposition Democratic Party has been calling for the urgent appointment of a left-leaning Judge Ma Eun-hyuk to secure a 6-vote majority to impeach the president, as an early election would favour their party leader Lee Jae-myung. The DP has also been pushing to amend the Constitutional Court Act to extend the retiring justices' terms. The Court Secretary General said while the suggestion is under internal review, there is no official position yet. When asked if President Yoon's ruling would be made by the 18th, the Court Secretary General said the aim is still to issue a verdict as swiftly as possible, but declined to specify a date. 오수영, Arirang News.
Myanmar is reeling from the aftermath of a devastating earthquake that took hundreds of lives as rescue and relief workers from international entities fly in to offer much-needed assistance. An Sung-jin reports.
Buildings have turned into rubble, houses buried in the ground. A rescue team pulls out a young child from a collapsed building in the city of Mandalay in Myanmar after a 7.7 magnitude earthquake hit the country on Friday. As aftershocks continue, the military regime estimates that at least 2,000 people are dead.
A very strong shaking started. Ground was slipping underfoot. The shaking lasted about a minute. When it ended, the walls of the palace and some other buildings were collapsing, and the cladding began to burst.
Experts say that the true death toll could rise far higher as search efforts continue, while there has been difficulty tracking the exact casualties in areas that are controlled by rebel groups. The U.S. Geological Survey says there is a 70% chance that the number of deaths will be above 10,000. Damage has been reported not only in Myanmar, but neighboring countries including Thailand and nearby Chinese provinces. The international community, including ASEAN and the United Nations, has been ramping up relief efforts and foreign medical teams have been deployed. The WHO has declared its highest level of emergency while deploying emergency medical teams into Myanmar with trauma kits, medical supplies, and other essentials.
We need urgent assistance, especially for the children, who often suffer the most in these kinds of situations.
Myanmar's military government has also declared a state of emergency. Despite the destruction from the earthquake, the country's military junta continued its airstrikes, which the UN has described as completely outrageous and unacceptable. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
In related news, the Korean government has decided to dispatch a consul from its embassy in Yangon to Mandalay to aid Korean nationals affected by the earthquake. According to the Foreign Ministry, there are some 2,000 South Koreans residing in Myanmar, most of them in Yangon, and about 70 in Mandalay. No Korean casualties have been reported thus far. Authorities here are also offering some $2 million worth of humanitarian assistance to Myanmar as part of relief support. U.S. President Donald Trump is ramping up his rhetoric on both Russia and Ukraine with regard to sealing a ceasefire deal. He's threatening heavier tariffs on Russian oil and vowing, quote, big problems for Kyiv if it backs away from its mineral deal with Washington. Park Hyo-bin has more.
Amid the stalled progress on the Ukraine-Russia ceasefire, U.S. President Donald Trump has expressed strong dissatisfaction with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In an NBC interview on Sunday, Trump revealed that he was very angry after Putin criticized Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's credibility. Trump also said that if Russia is found responsible for prolonging the conflict, he would impose secondary tariffs on Russian oil, ranging from 25% to 50%. He warned that countries purchasing Russian crude oil could face tariffs, signaling economic pressure as potential leverage in the ongoing conflict. Trump also had a message for Zelensky. Speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One on Sunday, Trump criticized the Ukrainian leader for trying to back out of a rare earth metals agreement.
And I think Zelensky, by the way, I see he's trying to back out of the rare earth deal. And if he does that, he's got some problems, big problems. We made a deal on rare earth, and now he's saying, well, you know, I want to renegotiate the deal.
With U.S.-Ukraine negotiations now stalling, Russia has begun rare metals talks with Washington. On Monday, Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev confirmed that discussions were underway with several companies already expressing an interest. Last month, Putin underscored Russia's vast reserves, looking to position Moscow as a more stable supplier than Ukraine. As diplomatic efforts stall, the potential economic pressure from tariffs may become a crucial turning point in the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Park Hyo-bin, Arirang News.
Here in Seoul, trade ministers of South Korea, China, and Japan met for their agenda ahead of new U.S. tariffs in the days to come. Moon Hye-ryun has more.
The trade ministers of South Korea, China, and Japan met in Seoul for the first time in nearly 6 years and underscored the need for stronger economic ties and pledged to expand trade partnerships amid growing global uncertainties. At the Trilateral Economic and Trade Ministers meeting on Sunday, South Korea's Trade Minister An Duk-gun, China's Commerce Minister Wang Wentao, and Japan's Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry Muto Yoji emphasized the importance of a stable global trade system and vowed to strengthen cooperation in key economic sectors. The discussions came just days before the U.S. government's scheduled announcement of new reciprocal tariffs as the three nations navigate rising protectionist pressures. The meeting was seen as a strategic move to coordinate a response with all three nations facing similar concerns as major U.S. trade deficit partners and potential targets of tariffs. And as a result, the ministers aligned on the broader goal of preserving a stable international trade system. During the talks, the ministers reaffirmed their commitment to multilateral trade frameworks, supporting reforms at the World Trade Organization and expanding the regional comprehensive economic partnership to include new members. They also pledged to accelerate negotiations for a high-level trilateral free trade agreement.
It is necessary to strengthen the implementation of RCEP, in which all three countries have participated, and to create a framework for expanding trade cooperation among the three countries through Korea-China-Japan FTA negotiations.
While South Korea and China currently have an FTA in place, discussions on a three-way agreement have stalled due to differing economic conditions and national priorities. Beyond trade agreements, the ministers addressed broader economic concerns, committing to stabilizing supply chains and expanding cooperation in green and digital industries. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
South Korean beauty products have surged in popularity in the U.S., driven by the Korean wave, and have now surpassed French cosmetics. According to Bloomberg on Monday, South Korea emerged as the top exporter of cosmetics to the U.S. in 2024, followed by France and Canada. It cited a report by the U.S. International Trade
Commission, showing Korean cosmetics exports to the U.S. in 2024 totaled over $1.7 billion. This success can be attributed to the Korean beauty industry's online marketing strategies through platforms like TikTok and Reddit, as well as partnership with major retailers such as Costco and Amazon. Korean pianist Kim Sae-hyun has taken first place at the Langue Crespon competition, a renowned triennial event in France. According to the Kumho Cultural Foundation on Monday, the 17-year-old won the competition with the rendition of Rachmaninoff's Concerto No. 3 in the final round of the competition this past Saturday. Fellow Korean pianist Hyo-joo placed third. Notably, his brother Hyo-hyuk was a co-winner of the same competition in 2022. Another past Korean winner is Im Dong-hyuk, who claimed the title in 2001. Time now to take a look at what's been happening in the world of sports. Joining us in the studio is our sports editor, Paul Need. Hello, Paul.
Hello.
Let us start with golf. Kim Hyo-joo has secured her 7th LPGA title.
Yes, the Ford Championship on Sunday, local time in Arizona. Kim Hyo-joo beat former world #1 Lilia Vu of the United States in a playoff. Kim had been 4 strokes behind heading into the final round, but hit an 8 under 64, including 9 birdies, while Vu hit a 4 under 68. This meant that they both finished at 22 under 266, so went back to the 18th to find a winner. That's where Kim struck a birdie to seal it. It was her 7th LPGA win overall, but first since the Volunteers of America Classic in October 2023. Meanwhile, in the men's game, Korean-Australian Lee Min-woo on Sunday won the Houston Open, finishing at 20 under par, 1 stroke ahead of world #1 Scottie Scheffler, as well as Gary Woodland, both of the United States, who finished tied at 19 under. The final day saw E hit 4 birdies and 1 bogey for a 3 under 67. It is the 26-year-old's first ever win on the PGA Tour in what was his 56th start. He is the younger brother of LPGA star Lee Min-ji.
Moving on to baseball, the Major League Baseball has a season began at the end of last week. 2 South Korean stars were in the opening day rosters for their respective clubs.
Yes, that's right. Those being Lee Jong-hoo of the San Francisco Giants and Bae Ji-hwan of the Pittsburgh Pirates. For Lee Jong-hoo, he scored twice as the Giants beat the Cincinnati Reds 6-4 on Thursday in their season opener. Then on Sunday, in what was Game 3 of the new season, he recorded his first multi-hit to help the Giants win their opening series 2-1. He batted 2 for 4 with 1 RBI and scored 2 runs against the Reds in a 6-3 win. Batting third, he raised his batting average to .300 and also leads his team 4 runs with 4. Meanwhile, Bae Ji-hwan made 2 appearances for the Pirates against the Miami Marlins, but was run out trying to reach third base in Sunday's 3-2 loss. He'd been left out for the first game, but then appeared in games 3 and 4 in a series that his team lost 3-1.
In domestic baseball, the LG Twins are making headlines with a remarkable 7-game winning streak to start the 2025 season.
Yes, and this sets a new franchise record and brings them closer to the KBO's all-time opening winning streak of 10 matches held by the 2003 Samsung Lions and the 2022 SSG Landers. This week, LG faced the KT Wiz in a 3-game series at Suwon's KT Wiz Park. If they sweep KT, they'll tie the league record. However, all matches scheduled for April 1st on Tuesday have been postponed. This is to mourn the death of a female fan in her 20s who died in hospital on Monday after a piece of metal fell 18 meters, hit a concession stand, then hit her on the head at the NC Dinos Stadium in Changwon on Saturday. All NC Dinos matches this week are now postponed.
Hope for no more tragedy. Okay, thank you, Paul. See you next week.
Thank you.
On the very last day of March, the cold snap is gradually fading away. It was chilly this morning, just like the weekend. However, the weather warmed up quickly and the temperature in Seoul rose to 14 degrees Celsius during the day. It will start off a bit warmer at 5 degrees tomorrow morning and will rise to 16 degrees in Seoul tomorrow. Dry weather advisories have been issued for inland areas. The atmosphere will become drier as the warm westerly winds blow in. Please be careful not to cause any fires in these dry conditions. Tomorrow morning, Gyeongju will start off at 2 degrees, Busan and Jeju at 6 degrees. Daily highs will move up to around 15 to 17 degrees across the country, feeling much warmer than last weekend. On Wednesday, there is more rain forecast for central parts of the country, Jeollabuk-do province and Gyeongsangbuk-do province. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.
How to survive in Korea. One room. So, you're surviving in Korea? If you signed a contract for a one room, obviously you're a pro. But the real deal begins now. Step 1. Housewarming. No need to buy toilet paper, diffusers or hand soap. You'll get them soon enough as housewarming gifts. And some are bound to pile up. There's nothing better to serve your guests than milpaeyu nabe. If you have Korean friends coming over, don't forget the extra garlic. Step 2. Garbage disposal. With great power comes great responsibility. You've had a good time, so let's get to work. It might be tempting to sweep everything into a trash can, but you have to separate your garbage. Not bothered? Beware that negligence is punished with a fine or public humiliation. Step 3. Drying rack. You're excited to live alone in Korea, but the fate of these items, hanger, storage, or a hanger. Go get fresh coffee outside. Jogging doesn't cost anything, and nothing beats instant rice. But keep one item around so that you don't get too lonely. Step 4. Pros of living alone. No mum. Cons of living alone. No mum. A new towel doesn't magically appear. You have to do the laundry regularly. If anyone gives a towel as a souvenir, take it. Get rid of mold immediately. Don't be lazy with the vacuum cleaner. Housework is an endless affair. Overwhelmed? Give your mum a call and thank her for everything she's done. Did you survive in your one room? Wait, you have an unwanted visitor. Call someone you fancy. Could be the right person for the job.
curious about Korean cultural heritage?
If you are a fan of Korean culture and history, listen up. Korean cultural heritage is based on a 5,000-year history.
The whole country is like a massive museum because it possesses such diverse cultural properties. Let's not wait any longer and take a look.
First, for beginners. For those who are not familiar with Korea, let's start with the world-famous list.
You can see how Korea's beautiful traditional patterns and historical features have been preserved.
And don't forget to experience Korea's intangible cultural heritage. From Gyeongsangbuk-do to Taechum, there's just so many exciting cultural heritages to experience.
These are for intermediate level tourists who have already visited Korea and its famous attractions. You might even be standing in a World Heritage Site right now.
How about searching for intangible cultural heritage that you can experience? 한소리, 제주 해녀 diving, 김장. Make some unforgettable memories while having fun.
Last but not least, the advanced level. It's the memory of the World Register. Korea possesses an extensive documentary heritage. Korea is serious about documentation and preservation.
A tour of Korean cultural heritage will become a legacy of your own.
Why not make your own Korean cultural heritage travel itinerary?
Isn't it fascinating?
Our lives are swept into a vortex of this intricately connected world. Providing an in-depth exploration of global security, diplomacy, economy, and culture to offer a unique international perspective. Embark on a global news journey with the Geovista today.
Presiding over Monday's cabinet meeting following his latest diplomatic agenda in New York, President Yoon South Korea's economy will grow. The central bank has kept its key interest rate unchanged. Mission complete for rocket duty selfish. Seoul is rallying in hopes of bringing the World Expo 2030.
Arirang.
Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. South Korea has been shaken by one of its most devastating wildfires on record, with more than 480 square kilometers of forest affected and the flames even breaching national parks last week. Thankfully, the main fires had been largely contained as better visibility and cooler temperatures helped extinguishing efforts. The wildfire killed at least 30 people, injured 45, and forced some 3,600 people to flee. From the rugged ridges of Gyeongsangbuk-do to the protected slopes of Jirisan, even areas known for their biodiversity and cultural heritage weren't spared. In part one of Within the Frame tonight, we invite Yoo Hong-gun of the Sobeksan National Park Nature Center to talk about the scale of destruction, the challenges in containing fires inside protected areas, and what measures are needed to prevent future disasters. Welcome to the program, Mr. Yoon.
Good evening.
So let's start right away. The recent wildfires has affected an unprecedentedly forest area of approximately 480 square kilometers, which is the largest on record, of course. The fires even spread into some national parks. Could you tell us what is the current damage situation and scale within the national parks?
Actually, there are 23 national parks in Korea, of which 2 were damaged. Jirisan Mountain, located in Sancheong County, and Gyeongsangbuk National Park, located in Gyeongsang County. In Jirisan's case, about 135 hectares was burnt. And in the case of Gyeongsangbuk, it was a really serious situation, as more than 20%, which is about 2,400 hectares of the total park area has been affected by this wildfire. For your information, over the last 10 years, the average size of wildfire in national parks was only 5 to 10 hectares. Then just looking at the size of the wildfire this time, it is already the worst wildfire ever, uncomparable. But as you can imagine, in national parks, it takes much more time for the forest to return to its original state because it is in the maturity stage or close to primeval forest compared to the ordinary forest. So the damage is much greater than the size of the damaged area itself.
So that really sounds like a significant amount of damage, considering it even went into protected areas. Now, the spread of wildfires into national parks is concerning not only just because of the ecological damage, but also for the destruction of cultural and historical heritage. And you mentioned Jirisan and Juangsan National Parks. Could you tell us what significance do these parks hold?
Starting with Jirisan National Park, since ancient times, Jirisan has been known as one of the 3 sacred mountains on the Korean peninsula. And when the national park system was introduced in Korea, it was designated as the first national park in 1967. In addition, it is the largest mountainous national park spanning 3 provinces and plays a role as a treasure trove of various ecosystems. Regarding the ecological importance, the Asiatic black bear restoration project has begun in this park, and more than 80 bears are currently living stably. This successful mammal restoration project has been widely known as best practice worldwide. Gyeongsangbuk Mountain is famous as one of the Korea's 3 major rocky mountains, along with Seorak-san and Wulchul-san. And in particular, the trekking course along Juwang Valley is a barrier-free trail. So anyone, including the elderly and children, can enjoy the gorge and canyon of Gyeongsangbuk Mountain. In addition, Daejeonsa Temple, located at the trailhead of the representative trail, serves as the landmark of Gyeongsangbuk National Park and is a historical temple built 1400 years ago during Silla Dynasty and stores several cultural assets, including national treasures.
Right, so a lot of history. Clearly, these sites really hold more than just natural value. Now, despite efforts by the National Park Service and also local governments to prevent the fires from crossing into park boundaries, the flames eventually spread inside. What were the main challenges in containing the fires within the national parks?
I think I can talk about 2 main factors: natural element and nationwide circumstance. First, the natural element was strong wind, dry weather, and high temperature, which provided better conditions to make the fire burn better. So the fire spread much faster and was difficult to control. In addition, rugged terrain made it difficult for firefighters to access, forcing them to slow down their work. The other one was the nationwide circumstance. Several wildfires occurred simultaneously across the country. Since the wildfire was such a big scale, only dealing with manpower was impossible to contain the fire. Helicopters had to be used to catch the main fire. However, to cover all the wildfires throughout the country, limited number of helicopters were deployed sporadically. So a small number of helicopters at a place were hostile to suppressing the large wildfires in Juangsan and Jirisan last week.
Right, so managing these fires in such terrain does appear very complex. Now, while taking lessons from these recent wildfire, what kind of support do you think the government should provide in the future for wildfires and other disasters?
Large-scale natural disasters like the wildfire this time are quite difficult to control with human power if they occur. Therefore, I think preventing before is the best measure. For this, I can talk about 2 things. First of all, I think it is necessary to strengthen national level campaigns and educational activities in order to raise the level of safety awareness of the people. Despite the ongoing wildfire in Jirisan Mountain this time, some hikers asked the National Park Office if it was possible to go multi-day hikes, staying overnight up the mountain. Also, there are still paddy burnings and garbage burning activities all over the countries. These are examples of the level of safety awareness that is still lacking. Second, the number of national park staff, considering the whole size of the park, is quite poor. Therefore, simple visual patrolling with bare eye is not enough to achieve its purpose. Then preventive activities using high-tech equipment such as smoke detectors, drones, and real-time cams are essential. Budget support for this purpose should be strengthened at the central government level.
Right, so raising public safety awareness and also possibly providing necessary equipment to prevent these disasters from happening would be definitely helpful. Now, national parks actually implement various preventative measures, we are aware, against these disasters like wildfires. Now, especially in spring, there are trail closures in place to reduce fire risks. How effective has these measures been in preventing the wildfires, and what does this imply?
National parks operate trail closure policy to prevent forest fires in spring and autumn respectively, which are the driest period of the year. In fact, since most wildfires are caused by human activities, trail closures in some routes has become an indispensable system during such a high risk of wildfire. Many hikers sympathize with the system, which is necessary for wildfire prevention and nature conservation, despite the inconvenience of restricting these hiking trails. In other words, there is also an effect of raising the awareness of the importance of wildfire prevention for the public. As a result of this, even though the forests of wild national parks account for more than 7% of the total forest in Korea, every year, when thousands of wildfires occur across the country, fewer than 10 wildfires happens within national park. This is significantly lower frequency than the average.
Despite so, preventative measures are still more necessary, though they're already in place. But now the key would be real-world effectiveness, how it would be effective in preparing for future disasters of this kind. Mr. Yoon, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and experience with us tonight. We appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me.
Now, wildfires are not only a challenge for South Korea. From Japan to California, massive blazes are tearing through forests at alarming speeds, and experts are pointing to climate change, forest composition, and delayed response systems as key drivers. Now, in part 2 of Within the Frame, we turn to David Bowman, wildfire expert and professor at the University of Tasmania in Australia, to break down why these fires are spreading faster, burning hotter, and becoming harder to stop. Good morning, good evening. Thank you for joining us, Professor Bowman.
Yeah, thank you. Pleasure to be able to contribute to a serious problem.
Our pleasure. Now, so let's delve in right away. Recently, wildfires have been occurring not only in Korea, but also in Japan and California. Professor, what is the cause of this global trend? And do you agree with some climate experts who believe it's because of global warming?
Yeah, look, we're getting a much better understanding of what I'm calling the global fire crisis. It stands to reason that we're seeing more extreme wildfire behaviour around the world for the simple reason that air temperatures are warmer, fire seasons are lengthening, and fuel types are drying out. In fact, one of the signals of a global fire crisis is fire in places you wouldn't expect fire. We're seeing that all over the world, places that would be traditionally just not a wildfire hotspot. For instance, the United Kingdom is now taking wildfire seriously. You don't think of the UK as a place like California where you would have house loss from wildfires. And another, I think, red flag, and that's certainly why the Korean situation is interesting, is when you're having historical structures being destroyed. They are a very good record that, over 1,000 years, these places have been safe, and something is changing. Certainly one of the factors that is changing is climate. There are other factors, of course, that we need to consider, particularly land use changes, the way people are using landscapes, maybe ceasing, believe it or not, traditional practices that might have been reducing the risk of fire as people move to cities. Often rural areas are less well maintained. So there's a lot of issues, but certainly climate change is certainly number one factor.
Right, environmental shifts definitely could contribute to that. Now, according to firefighting authorities, the wildfire in Uisong spread at a speed of 8.2 kilometers per hour. For most of us who are unfamiliar, could you explain for us, how fast is that speed and what contributed to such a rapid speed?
Right, so one of the things that has been detected around the world is that fires have a really accelerating growth rate. They seem to be growing faster. One of the reasons is what we call rate of spread. So 8 kilometres an hour, you wouldn't be able to outrun that fire in a natural landscape. So, it's a very fast moving fire, walking speed's about 4 kilometres. So it's twice as fast as walking. So they're moving very fast. Why are they moving fast? A couple of reasons. Wind is certainly a number one reason that we're seeing what we call wind-driven fires more common. They can just absolutely overwhelm fire suppression effort because the fires being accelerated by these strong winds just rapidly blasting across landscapes. Certainly in hilly terrain, fire, we talk about fire running up hills, so it can accelerate. Makes sense. The flames are able to lean down on the ground, catching more fire in front of it. So, we talk about fire having a behaviour. Certainly, we talk about fire having these fire runs where you have explosive growth of fire. And once you go into these wind-driven fire events, certainly we saw in California, very concerningly, you can't use aviation to control the fires because you can get wind speeds that are so strong that it's no longer safe to be operating helicopters and aircraft, particularly in terrain where you get a lot more turbulence. So a combination of factors, but certainly a big climate factor and a big terrain factor.
Then, Professor, do you think the topography of South Korea's steep mountains and the predominance of pine trees over hardwoods also contribute to the rapid spread of the fire?
Oh, absolutely. You can see that in the footage you're showing, this steep terrain. Firefighting in steep terrain is really very, very difficult because the fires, as I said, they run up slopes, but it's extremely difficult for people to be on the ground. It's just, it doesn't look much, but when you, put a backpack on and try to walk around on a steep slope, everything is against you, particularly if you're trying to confront a fire that's moving quickly. So terrain is an enormously important factor. Another thing is that terrain can funnel wind down valleys. So you can get all sorts of strange behaviours. You can get what we talk about topographic steering of wind. So even there's been situations where firefighters have been killed because the fires can, even though they might think that they're safe weather conditions, the local terrain can set up a situation like a chimney where the fire can suddenly accelerate at extraordinary speeds, overwhelming people.
Right, so the mixture of wind and this forest type and geography also worsened the situation. Now, even though the main fire of this wildfire in South Korea has been contained, concerns about the reignition of the fire is remaining high. Professor, what are the methods for extinguishing the remaining embers to completely put out the fire?
So, yeah, the mopping up operations are very time consuming. What firefighters do is that they seek to get a perimeter to contain the fire, and I understand that's occurred. And then they need to go and make certain that all of the active fires are put out. And that's slow work because you often, in the terrain, it'll be using helicopters and also people cutting fire breaks, fire trails and so on. And then there will be a point where there's no longer a risk of expansion, even if there are still some areas burning inside the fire area, there'll be no longer a risk that the fire will be able to spread. So that could take, it could take weeks, particularly in this hilly terrain. And, you've got a lot of fuel. It's another factor that we didn't mention is that before spring, you have a lot of leaf litter in the deciduous forests, and then the evergreen forests, the conifer forests, have a lot of litter bed, which may be very dry. So I would imagine the firefighting effort will be securing the perimeter and then going into the side, inside the fire ground and trying to find areas that are still burning and put those out. And I hope that they leave some unburnt islands because that will be very, very important wildlife refuge, because this is really a terrible, these very large fires, intense fires, are very terrible for wildlife and, the rehabilitation, but particularly the larger animals need a habitat, they need a home. So we need some unburnt vegetation for them, and I hope that's preserved.
Right, so it sounds like full containment requires continued vigilance, and also efforts are needed to, preserve the ecosystem as well. Now, some of the reasons cited for the wildfire spread in Korea include a lack of centralized command, an aging firefighting workforce, and also a shortage of helicopters and other firefighting equipment. Since you're in Australia, how does Australia prepare for and respond to such wildfires?
So, yeah, it's an interesting question. The Australian approach is actually a little bit different to the American approach for a variety of reasons. We haven't relied so much on aviation and effectively a firefighting army. We do a lot more what's called fuel management. So we use our forests, eucalyptus forests, are very fire prone. We use, where we can, adapting an Aboriginal approach, actually, of burning the vegetation under very mild conditions, and that reduces the fuel load and makes firefighting easier. We also have fire lines established in the landscape called fire breaks that we can use for firefighting operations. So the classical approach of just trying to put all fires out, stopping all fires, which was the American approach, has run into trouble because you end up with landscapes that are really very, very filled up with fuel, and that huge quantities of fuel will eventually burn, and when it burns, it often burns extremely intensely. One of the things that I would really suggest is, for scientists in Korea to do is to try to find out about traditional practices. It would be very interesting to know back maybe 1,000 years ago when people were living with forests, how were they managing them? Certainly we know even in Europe, people were using fire, prescribed fire to reduce fuels. It helped them, find things like, forest foods. It often helped increase the abundance of wildflowers and wildlife and so on. And again, it's sort of thinking about using fire in a very controlled way to manage landscapes rather than just try to put a total prohibition on all fires and then fight them when you get an outbreak, because no matter how good your technology, your detecting systems, your firefighting army and your firefighting air force, as the American experience has shown, eventually under climate change, you will see fires escalate to a point where they become uncontrollable. And in the worst case, those fires will cross into urban areas and you will get mass destruction of infrastructure and housing, as occurred in LA. So I'm certainly, the Australian approach is not just about firefighting, it's also about landscape management and fuel management. And something that probably is a very foreign idea for Korea, but might be an interesting thing for fire managers and also for scientists to explore and to think about.
Professor, thank you so much for the suggestion. It would definitely be of help to South Korean authorities as well. Now, we'll have to let you go. We're running out of time, but thank you so much for your time, your insights tonight. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. A pleasure. And I hope everything works out. We've got a big problem on our hands. We're all working together. So it's great to help. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, as the smoke largely cleared in South Korea, one question still remains. Are we ready for the next one? Because how we act now will decide what burns and what's protected tomorrow. Let's hope that from this disaster, we'll learn the lessons we need to face for what comes next. And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.
How to survive in Korea. Weddings. Step 0. Attire. As a guest, dress formal to business casual. Avoid wearing all white, shorts or going topless. Step 1. Arrival time. Arrive 30 minutes prior to the wedding ceremony. Too many cars, too many halls, too many people. There are many twists and turns. Take pictures and shake hands. And write your name vertically, not horizontally, in the guest book. Step 2. Or, shibor. 50,000 won, 100,000 won, 150,000 won. Cash gifts are given in these units. Decide on the amount based on your relationship. Write your name vertically on the envelope. Step 3. Wedding etiquette. Fill up the front row. Guests have 3 duties to fulfill: clapping, cheering, and taking pictures. Step 4. Dining. Take off your jacket. This will be your seat from now on. Start with the not your everyday delicacies. Kalbijjim. Yes. Bosa. Yes. Chili shrimps. Definitely yes. Kimbap. Yeah. Only if you can't live without it. No need to pile up food. You have more than one opportunity. Did you survive the wedding? Wait. Did someone catch your eye? What are you waiting for? You're looking fine today.
There is no greater blessing than to have good health as you grow old. Even though my mom is over 70, she is peppy and full of energy. One day, our family started practicing Taekwondo, and it turned out to be a special blessing for us. Taekwondo family, return to happiness.
옛날에는 택시부터 시작해가지고 버스,